Best Bet Live, Hand of the Week.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dustin Shocklock here for Best Bet Live, and today we have a very special edition of Hand of the Week. I'm here with my good friend, Hunter Cichy, and today we're going to be going through a recent hand from a 2-5 no-limit hold'em deep stack cash game that Hunter actually played. And in this hand, Hunter's going to land in a really strange river predicament. And he's going to walk us through the hand step by step from the beginning to the end and let us know his thought process along the way and what we do when we land in these tricky river spots. So with that being said, Hunter, why don't you walk us through the action?
Sure, let's do it. So like Dustin said, we're playing 2-5 with some very deep stacks. We're 8-handed. We're about midway through the stream. Brooks goes ahead and opens to 20 under the gun here. In game, I was thinking he's on tilt. He's opening a lot wider than you normally would under the gun, probably 35 to 40% of hands. And Jeremy's a thinking pro from Vegas, and I remember he 3-bet Brooks a few other times earlier in the session because Brooks is probably opening too wide. So I think Jeremy's range is wider than normal here. As a result, I think it shifts pocket jacks for me into a pretty easy cold 4-bet for value. Normally this would just be a flat call. That's what the solver would do. I think that's what a lot of live cash players would do. But when ranges get wider, you got to go for thinner value. Then Dave decided to come in and cold call the 4-bet, and this hardly ever happens in live cash. After the stream, I went back and looked at the stats. He was VPIPing 72% of the time, so he's voluntarily putting money in the pot 72% of the time. He's playing really wide, seeing a lot of flops. Prior to this hand, he cold called a big 3-bet from me with 7-6 offsuit and raised the flop and barreled the turn with no equity. So he's playing street poker, and his range is a lot wider than normal, and that plays a big role on this river here. So they both check to me. I decide to c-bet small for value here because I can easily get called by 10s, 9s, 8s. In Dave's case, I'm also getting called by hands like ace 7 suited, 8 7 suited, 7 6 suited, pocket 6s, pocket 5s, 5 4 suited, ace 4 suited, ace 3 suited. Flush draws, I don't think he's ever going to check raise with them. He's also going to peel with a lot of ace king, ace queen, especially if he's got a backdoor flush draw. And when Jeremy overcalled here, he's going to have a stronger hand than Dave. He's going to have a lot of overpairs. Some of them might actually be ahead of pocket jacks. He's also going to have hands like ace 7 suited, 8 7 suited, 7 6 suited some of the time, but you have to keep in mind that he is 3-betting the under the gun opener, so he's not always going to have those. I think after he overcalls, I can pretty safely remove 7s, 4s, 3s, and most of his flush draws here. So at the time I was putting him on something like pocket 10s or pocket 9s, maybe pocket 8s. When the 5 comes off here, it's a double flush draw. If this was a normal 4-bet pot, this would be kind of an irrelevant card unless I was barreling with a hand like ace king of clubs or ace queen of clubs. Normally nobody should have a straight here, and normally nobody should have 2 pair here, but ranges are much wider than normal, and that's why I decided to check back. It's starting to get too thin to bet for value here, especially since both of them could easily be slow playing aces, kings, or queens. Jeremy is less likely to slow play. Dave is more likely to slow play pre-flop because cold 5-betting with aces is really strong and you're not always going to get a lot of action. When Dave leads out on this river, normally he should just be open jamming with everything because Jeremy and I are very unlikely to have a flush, very unlikely to have an 8 high straight. When Jeremy calls, I think he still has most of his flushes and most of his 8 high straights here, because he's a lot more likely to get an overcall from me than he is to get Dave to call a jam with worse. So it makes this spot really difficult for me because I can't jam over the top as a bluff. I don't have any club blockers. And I'm calling for a chop. I'm basically calling 450 to win 1/3 of what's in the middle. So I need to be right a little bit more than half of the time here. I have to know that neither of them have anything a little bit over half of the time. And given that Dave is playing 72% of hands, maybe not that many after I 4-bet, but definitely more than normal, it makes it really hard for me to have a 3-way chop opportunity that often. I have to be really confident that both of them have nothing. And when Dave bets smaller and Jeremy just calls, I think it makes it a lot more likely that one of them has an 8 or clubs than if Dave had just open jammed, or if Jeremy had jammed over the top of Dave, or if Dave had checked and Jeremy jammed. In those situations, I would actually be more likely to call than in this situation when Dave bets so small. So I end up tanking for a long time. Really confusing spot. You can see that I'm kind of agitated here because it's so unusual. This spot hardly ever comes up in live cash. I end up making the fold, unfortunately. I was wrong this time, but I think if you add up the sum of all outcomes, this is probably a pretty standard fold.
Best Bet live stream. Watch us play.